Hey everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I have a fresh new copy of That Time You Killed Me. It's a two-player only abstract strategy chess variant game by Pandasarus Games. So let's get straight into it. You and your opponent are trying to kill each other because one of you invented time travel, and well, the other is possibly the person who went back in time and stole time travel from the other. Yes, that might be hard to understand, but the thought that you have right now is exactly the thoughts you will have when playing this game. There are 3 boards set up: the past, the present, and the future. What you do in one might affect something in another, but again, your goal is to kill your opponent, like in chess. Well, kind of. And more specifically, you're trying to eliminate all of your opponents in 2 eras or on 2 boards to win the game. Players will take turns going back and forth, and a turn will consist of choosing a copy of yourself in the era where your focus token is currently located. In the game, you might eventually have more than one self in the same era, so you can only activate one of those selves on a turn. You will then perform 2 actions, and if you can perform 2, you must. Lastly, you will move your focus token to a different era, never being able to stay in the same era for the next turn, and this will also give your opponent some information on what you might be doing for your next turn. Because on your next turn, you're going to be able to go through those same things, but do it in the new era where your focus token is now at. So what can you do for your actions? Well, when you're first learning the game, you will only play with the basic actions, and as you learn the game, you will open up new chapters, and each will add new things to the game. This will be new actions and or new rules. And you should play these chapters in order, and when you're done, you can then combine the chapters and play a very complex abstract strategy game combined with many layers of that strategy. Okay, so the actions. You can move one space orthogonal in any direction, but you can't move through the walls or the edges of the board. If there is another player next to you, you can move and push them to the next space. If you plan well, then you can move to push your opponent into a wall and squish them. This is a good way to kill your opponent. But when this happens, it's removed from the game, never to be returned. So don't give this back to that player, as they might sneak it back into their supply to have more selves. There is only a set number of these people tokens for the game. Yes, you will be adding more selves onto the board during the game. Now, if you manage to push your opponent into one of their own copies of themselves, then they both will die, and this causes a paradox. So watch out how you stack your own selves or your own tokens in the same era. You can then take an action to time travel forward by moving a piece from an era to the same space forward, either past to present or present to future. You can only do this action of the same spot forward if it's not occupied by another piece or another object in that era. To travel backwards, you'll do the same thing but move backwards. Again, the space needs to be unoccupied, but when traveling backwards, you actually produce a new copy of yourself in that same space that you just left because, well, time. Again, players will have their own copy of themselves, but if a player has no more available, this action cannot be performed. Again, you'll be doing 2 actions with the same token, so if you decide to time travel, then you will then take your second action in the new era, even if your focus token isn't in that new era. Now, this is the basic game, so you combo these actions together, try to trap your opponent and cause them to lose all of their tokens from 2 of the 3 boards. You will always check for victory at the end of your own turn, so you can never lose on your own turn. Now remember, there are 4 other boxes of content that I haven't even opened up yet, so if you want to discover these on your own, then go ahead and end this video now because I'm going to cover these boxes. But if you're interested in what the future of this game holds, let me touch on each of these chapters, each adding more actions and complexity to the game. Chapter 1. Growth. Seeds, shrubs, and trees. Now you can grow deadly bushes and trees that can be pushed on top of your opponent to kill them. A new action is to plant a seed, and when you do this, you will plant a seed to your active era in an empty space beside you or in the space that you're in. Seeds don't block players from moving into those spaces, but bushes and trees do. When placing a seed, the next era will grow a shrub if that space is empty. And again, in the next era, if that space is empty, a tree will then be placed. Another action is to then remove a seed by being in the same space or beside that space with a seed that's there. You will then do the ungrow action by taking off that seed, and in so doing, you will be taking off the bush and or the tree that are in the same spaces that are in the next eras. This also includes any fallen trees. Seeds also can only share spaces with players, never any other objects. Trees can also topple over when you move in its direction and it's next to you. If a tree lands on you, then you die. Players or objects cannot move into spaces with fallen trees, and if a player is pushed into a fallen tree, they die. Similar to the bushes, if you get pushed into a bush, then you die. Trees can't be pushed into walls though or other objects, but you can push another tree to cause a chain reaction to another tree. Chapter 2. Influence. Statues of 3 colors: orange, black, and white. Each player takes the statues of their color and adds them to their supply. An orange statue is then placed on the 7th space in each era. These statues not only affect its era, but all later eras as well, meaning whenever they are pushed or pulled in either era, you alter the position in each era further along the timeline. Players can build a new statue once per game. Pushing a statue works just like you might think. You move one space into a statue, and it moves one space in the same direction. Now when pulling, you can move away from the statue, and the statue is then moved in the space the player just left. When a statue moves, its copies moves in the next era in the same direction and distance. Since moving statues don't affect earlier eras, the statues won't always line up in the same spaces from era to era, but again, when moved, the statue in the next era will move in the same direction and the same distance. Statues cannot be pushed into walls or any of those objects that can't be pushed. When a player is pushed into a statue that cannot be pushed, then they die. So you will have 3 statues in your supply, but they are all the same statue. So you will only build a statue once in any era, and to build a statue, you take the action to build and place a statue beside you. Statues will appear in the same space in every later era, even if the space is occupied. If the space is occupied with a person or an object that can be pushed, then they get pushed one space to the same direction that you place the statue. And like you guessed it, if that pushed a player into a wall or an object that cannot be pushed, then they die. Chapter 3. Memory. Elephants: 3 dark, 3 light, 3 white hats, and 3 black hats. Dark elephants are placed out on number 4 of each era. Light elephants are on number 13 on each era. And each player takes their 3 hats to their own supply. So elephants can be trained, and a player can command their trained elephants. When players are pushed into an elephant, then they die. So you can take an action to train an elephant adjacent to you, and then you place one of your hats on top of it. And since elephants have memory, the same elephant in the next era that is not wearing one of your own hats will also get trained, and so on. So only one player can control each elephant at a time, but you can train an elephant controlled by your opponent, and you will then replace its hat with yours. Also, since training only affects forward eras, it's possible to control different elephants in different eras. Once you train an elephant, you can then take the action to command it, which means you can move it to any space orthogonal, no matter where you are located in that era, meaning you don't need to be right beside it. When an elephant moves onto a space with another player, that player gets trampled and dies. You can only command a trained elephant that is in the same era as your active self. But if you travel to a new era, you can then take your second action and command an elephant that you have trained in that era. Chapter 4. Convergence. This is where you combine chapters. You will combine any 2 chapters and follow the rules that we've gone over. The rulebook includes details of further interactions that you might run into, and the rulebook will make things a little more clear. Further, this chapter includes alternate timelines that are advanced variants of the game. Achievements is another way to play the game. When someone completes the achievement, they will add their name to that envelope, and then they will open up the contents and use them when playing the next game. There is a lot to discover in Chapter 4, and you can really play the game how you want. Have fun with some new possibilities and get to discover new surprises. The gameplay is a straight-up abstract strategy game of tactics, planning, and surprising the other player with something they don't see coming. Although I do feel like the game is so much more than that. As you read the rulebook, you actually feel the theme in the game. You most likely missed this from my video as I focused on how to play the game, but the rulebooks include a lot of text and flavor text that really matches up with the theme and combines the theme into the gameplay. The game can be played so many different ways, but the basics of the game can be understood, but makes playing the game a little more complex just because there's so much, if I do this here, what will happen over there? One small thing can really make a big effect, so the game has that chess feel where some people can only think 2 moves ahead while others can plan out a better attack. And either way, just like chess, the game can be enjoyed by all different types of players. The game is played pretty quick because as players focus on certain boards, they will most likely not be able to plan out on all 3 boards at the same time, and so it's not surprising that you will lose some of yourselves at some point in the game, but the player with a better planned out finish will become the better player. But this is also hard to do because when a player is knocked off of one board, their focus goes back onto the 2, which is not spread out as much as the other who has all 3 boards. If you leave your guard down on the one that you're not on, it can be easy for them to travel to your board and then kill you. So there is a lot of killing in this game, and chapters will add stuff, making the game different and also a little more complex as you go on. If you like what you've heard so far, then you probably need to get this game. We have enjoyed the game mostly due to its quickness and because there is something new to discover as you keep playing the game. So for us, it wasn't a play once or twice game because we felt like there was still more in the game to discover. After playing through all the chapters, we then figure out what our favorite way to play the game is, which will be different for everyone, but we then play the game this way without playing kind of the other stuff. I think you will get a decent amount of plays out of this game. If you think of your favorite board game, how many times do you play it in a year? Well, we have played this game more than our favorite game just because it's, again, quick and there are more things to discover with it, and discovering new stuff is, well, always fun. So get to killing to be the inventor of time travel, or just be the inventor of time travel in That Time You Killed Me by Pandasarus Games. Again, this is Boardgame Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.